and we are recording. If you ever see red in the chat window, that's me. So I probably want to communicate something with you. So pay attention to the red. I just typed something. And let's give it over to Bill.
All right. I just wrote hi back, but nothing happened. Oh, there we go. My chat. Oh, I know. I see my chat windows. I don't know. Oh, there it goes. All right. Hi back. Okay. Good to have you guys on board. I hope you enjoyed last week off doing your CITI course. Anybody want to write any comments or any thoughts about having gone through that other than, well, what was this good for? I will answer that here in a second. Go ahead and type some comments, or you can speak up if your mics work. Right, Felipe, I think anybody that has a mic that's working can step on in and do some talking. You might as well start doing that now.
Yes, everybody has microphone rights.
And we have 8 now that have joined us. Good. Um, so I looked in the folder a couple days ago, I guess, and uh, pretty good representation. Just about everybody's gotten through it. If you have a problem, let me know, and we can talk more about it. Since nobody's really responding at all about the CITI training, I do want to say that the purpose of it is that because you're nano people, I thought taking a session or two to really go through human subjects research in more detail than probably you want to know. We already that would suffice, and we could discuss part. It's interesting that there's an article that I'll show you here in a minute when after we get done with the introduction, that you can download, or you should go look at, having to do with using human subjects and actually animal subjects and the nanotechnology. Well, there's a whole bunch of nanotechnology applications in the medical sciences. So if you were to do research along those lines, you would more than likely have to get IRB approval, the Institutional Review Board approval. You'd have to more than likely do a lot more training in human subjects research before you did that. And again, the whole purpose of human subjects research is to guarantee that you have knowledge. Now, we could debate whether that's a guarantee or not, that you have knowledge of um, the things that really went wrong, the ethical dilemmas that presented themselves over the last decades and centuries that have led to regulation. And this is true of animal subjects as well as human subjects, that there have been experiments or researchers or institutions or situations that um, were in one sense or another unethical, and um, led to lots of regulation. So it's important to at least have some appreciation of that, and I hope that you got at least some of that when you went through that CITI. Um, since Felipe put up the project reports, this is what one point I want to make about making sure your microphones work. Because let's just go through this real quick. Is not a very long description, not a very comprehensive PowerPoint presentation or anything like that. But I would like you to, as it says here. Oh, I got to find my little pointer. There we go. No, wait a minute. Arrow. Ah, there's my arrow. Okay. So on this project reports, it's talking about just a short description of a situation. And if you look at the second paragraph, that some issue that is happening and your thoughts on that issue, or one that has the potential to occur, and what steps you might take to prevent it from occurring, having to do with your world in research and nanotechnology. So, Aaron, I'll get to your question here in a sec. Um, that um, uh, what's interesting about teaching in different areas, nanotechnology, physics, psychology, biology, whatever, is that you all have very unique situations that pop up. Not only that, is that because we're a research institution, we have a lot of cutting edge or emerging issues that pop up, things that aren't in the textbooks yet, won't be in the textbooks for 10 years. And so what makes it really interesting is that there's things that you might encounter that you're grappling with right now that would be worth mentioning. And that, although as I do say down here, please don't write any details that would get you or anyone at your work or your institution in any kind of trouble. If you have an official complaint to make, then by all means go through your institutional channels. So what I'd like you to do is to pick some path, either something that you've heard about having in nanotechnology, not just not at your work necessarily, but it having to do with nanotechnology, and or something that is happening, or something that could happen, potential. So there's three levels there, and pick one of those paths to develop for your scenario. The format is really quick. You're only going to have about 5 or 10 minutes at the most here on the Adobe Connect system. And what we'll do is Felipe will post your PowerPoint slides, and you'll thumb through what the situation was, who the stakeholders are, what are the conflicting interests, what are the ethical issues that are identified, and then some ways that those issues may result.
If I could have those PowerPoints in advance, that would be great. You guys can put them on the Dropbox.
Exactly. So so it says here also to add 3 questions. So you have your description, 750 words. You have a PowerPoint slide, and then a couple of questions where the group can choose one, and we can discuss it after you're done talking. And then you'll submit your papers and assignments as PDFs and as a PowerPoint presentation um, in order to load in for a presentation. So a deadline for that, I would say, would be the 18th, November 18th. So today being Wednesday, that would be Monday the 18th. I think that'll give us enough time. Since there's only eight of you or so, that shouldn't be too overwhelming. Although 8 PowerPoints and 8 PDFs, that has become 16 files. So make sure you have your name in the description of the file name. All right. Sound good? Let me get to Aaron's question. Aaron says, are these files the same ones available in the Dropbox? These files being the ones for download? They're not currently in Dropbox. They will be after this hour or after we're done with our session. I hesitate putting things in the Dropbox that I might tweak or we may not present until after we've actually done it. So yes, they'll be there after, say, 6 o'clock or so. All right, Aaron? All right. Okay, thanks. You betcha. The next page here. Do I have another page? What do we want to talk about next? Either mentor interviews or what is Felipe going to come up with? Oh, the Adobe, the actual session. Sounds good. We can go back. Okay, good. I want to look at the schedule here. And as you see, we're going to talk today about publication, peer review, and data. And this will be pretty useful to you, I think. And I'm going to ask you a couple of poll questions as we go through this, and think about if you're going to publish, where you would publish. What sort of journal would you go to? But before we get to that, I'd like to ask a little bit. Raise your hand now that you know how to raise your hand if you had a chance to talk to your mentor and ask those mentor questions. Yay, Mitch. Yay, Zach. All right, we're going down in order. You don't have to go in order, you guys. um, Great. Would you want to speak to that at all? You can do it right now. And all what I mean to speak to that is just simply say, I met with my mentor. He or she, we went through the questions, and here's some of the responses. I was surprised by X, or I kind of knew everything that she was talking about, or whatever you want. I'm just sort of leading you on here. So So of you four, do any of you want to speak to that? Give you a minute to think about it. Y'all took your hands down. I think you can just start talking. Okay, right. As Felipe says, you can type your response. Let me give you a minute just to somebody just dive in there and um, talk about. There you go. All right. Okay, Mario, it's okay. We'll wait for Ryan and Clay. Good. Okay, Clay, you get them. Anybody else typing, or Aaron or Brittany want to respond? Oh, that's good, Ryan. That's great. If your advisor is traveling, is there a chance to talk like over Skype or some other way? I figure there's um, you're able to communicate with your mentor at some point. Good. See, someone else was typing, I think. Good, Ryan. Ryan says he'll try and talk to him tomorrow. That's great. So we'll make some room then next week. Oh, Aaron, conferences last week, sometime next week. Okay, good. So let's try and make an effort to get that done between now and next time. Because again, the huge power in that really is what you learned from it, and then also what you can share with your classmates here. All right, mentor's been traveling. Boy, a lot of meetings. You guys are all traveling. Great. Okay. All right. So we're gonna talk a little bit about Frankenstein next week. We should have done it last week, I guess, around where uh, Halloween, etc. But we're going to talk about the Frankenstein next week, and uh, social responsibility of scientists, which is that can be kind of interesting. And it's also interesting when you all talk back and provide some comments. So I'm hoping that you'll start talking here, and we can get some feedback from you on these uh, these issues, including mentoring and the social responsibility. All right. What else we have here as far as house cleaning, I guess, if you will? We had that article, Truth or Consequences, that was on the download for the last couple of weeks. Oh, wait, let me read Zach's here. Um, Surprised me most about how much preparation my mentor took in data collection data books. Oh, good. Getting accurate data and backing up everything with a hard copy and covering yourself. Yeah, we actually will talk about that today, and that's uh, that's really good to hear. On the Truth or Consequences article, I think that was the one about the lab in Wisconsin, University of Wisconsin in Madison, that had some issues with their advisor. Did anybody just want to give me 5 words? What do you think about that? Okay, 10 words. Wait for Clay, he's typing. Clay's still typing. He's a good typer. Is this the temptation? And we've seen something similar to actually altered a graph and published it. Got caught. Ooh. Got caught. Well, maybe you can talk about that more on the 20th as part of, that would be actually a really good presentation if that's something that is, I don't want to say, I guess, public knowledge, but, or you could generalize it. It sounds like that might be an interesting discussion. If that's okay, Clay, I don't want to hear any more right now. um, oh, okay. Hold on. You're typing. Great. Um, okay, so let's launch into authorship and that kind of stuff. Where are we here? Let's see. Oh, look at that. It made it. So there's a nano fly for you. Well, it's not quite nano. Or else that's a really big finger. The nuts and bolts of ethical publication. So we're going to talk about publication and data. There's uh, things that we hear all the time. Um, Felipe adds, you see in the red with turnitin.com and other tools, it's hard to get away with anything. And of course, here's an example of someone that got away with something. This is an author. Japanese fraud case highlights weaknesses in scientific publishing. Dr. Fuji faked nearly 200 medical studies over 2 decades. How is he able to avoid detection for so long? Well, Felipe writes that with turn.com, you can't get away with it. Well, apparently this fellow did. How did he get away with it? Well, he started his own journal and was the editor in his own journal. Um, lasted for a few years until he got caught. Here's another, the good or the bad um, sort of our issue here with regards to publications. This one's subtitled or it's called Publishing's Gender Gap. The um, female scholars are gaining ground in publishing. Get my arrow out here. There's my arrow. It says here, but cluster in subdisciplines and tend not to be listed as first or last authors. What's really interesting, this first paragraph, the percentage of women authors in academic publishing has risen to 30% since 1665. Wow, yay, yay, women. But women are still less likely to be first or last author and tend to cluster in subdisciplines, according to researchers at the University of Washington who analyzed 2 million academic papers published between 1665 and 2010 by 2.7 million scientists, social scientists, and humanities scholars. That's horrible. But is that good? I guess it's better than 28%, but you'd think it'd be at least 50%. So there are things in publishing that may not seem equitable, and this is definitely one of them. And this article goes on. This was October, just over a year ago, 2012, out of the Scientist. So if you want to go look that up, um, it's available. So there's some issues. There you get away with plagiarism or falsifying papers, or you can get away with maybe not giving equitable authorship status out. But that's why we're doing a lot of these sessions, to sort of catch that and learn that that's not appropriate. Something that we'd like to know, or you should know, is as I say over here, is how do nano people publish? I guess really small. Yeah, sorry, lots of little nano innuendo. Um, some in some journals, this is JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association. Um, some have very detailed authorship agreements. This one starts off with your information and then details your responsibility. And then I certify that this manuscript represents original and valid work. and neither this manuscript nor one with substantial similar content under my authorship has been published. Blah blah blah. So it goes on getting the area an issue of duplicate publication. If requested, I'll provide the data. It goes on. But then it also asks in the second part of this form is what role did you play? Uh, did you provide the greatest intellectual content? Did you process um, the samples? Were you involved in the statistics? What was your role in putting this paper together? And that by going through those criteria, you can then determine, your basically your authorship status. So the Journal of American Medical Association, or JAMA, has a very specific and detailed authorship agreement form. They also talk a lot about financial disclosure, funding support, conflicts of interest, uh, and um, other issues that may influence how your paper is published and the type of results that you might have gotten. And so those sorts of biases and influences want to be disclosed, and that's one of the issues. Does anybody here know where they, or have they? Raise your hand if you've published a paper. 10 participants now. Yay, Ryan. Yay, Clay. Good. Now raise your hand if you were first author. Now raise your hand if you deserve to be first author and you weren't. No, that's okay. We won't go that route. Um, but so maybe somebody type in there the name of the journal that you would most likely publish in. Just type in a journal name. Journal of Irreproducible Nano Results. Something like that. Nature, great. Oh, okay. Petrochemical. Wow. Okay. That's pretty exciting. I mean, those are. I mean, Nature in particular, but those others are pretty good journals. So as you already know, especially the 4 or 5 of you that have already published papers, you know what an author is and what your duties are, um, and the purpose of authorship. It's basically promoting. It it um, promotes knowledge and allows others to read about the work you've been doing. But it's also kind of the gold coin of science. It really is a way for career advancement, promotion, and tenure, as well as contributing knowledge to the field. In different areas, such as humanities, math, computer science, medical sciences, natural sciences, there's different criteria for authorship. Medical sciences, um, like I had the JAMA authorship agreement form, there's some criteria there about contributing substantially to the work. There tends to be a lot of. I'll go back one slide to mathematical and computer sciences, and maybe some of you have had this experience, is that there's many authors, sometimes up to 30 or more, and they may list authors just alphabetically. And in other areas like natural science, um, often it's just one or two, unless it's a big collaborative project. Um, that you may just have one or two authors on a line. In those cases, maybe it's easier to determine authorship. Social sciences, the APA, there's a standard to follow in some of the areas. Now, things like honorary membership, ghost membership, and anonymous or pseudonyms are, for the most part, not tolerated. Let's see, where are we here? I think we come up with, oh yeah. Um, so honorary authorships are very rare. In other words, you want to honor the dean of your college or the president of your university, so you make them an author. Um, Ghost authorships, if an individual should be listed as having made significant contributions on a team or as a sole investigator but is not listed, it obscures that the investigator is conducting research. So, there's something wrong with obscuring where credit is due. And then anonymous or pseudonyms, those may be used in the case of where you need to protect an author for some reason, um, but in general are not um, reliable categories. Co-authors. Remember, if you're a co-author, you have as much responsibility for that paper as the primary author. So you have to look at the accuracy and the integrity of the entire manuscript. If not, if you're just doing the statistics, or you just did figures or tables or something like that, and you're still an author, then that should be designated somewhere, yeah, as a footnote in the paper, so it's clear and it's been determined that what your role as an author has been. The biggest thing in authorship is author order. That's the biggest place to have bad feelings, um, and maybe it's the easiest thing to fix. In other words, if you're considering getting together with other people to write a paper, one of the first things you can say is, well, what's the order of authorship? I think I'm going to contribute the most. I thought of the idea. Um, uh, I collected most of the data, so I'll be first author. And then everybody says, oh yeah, okay, that's fine. Well, I'll do the literature review. I'll do, anyway, and you break it up. Now, it may change because if you go along and the paper's getting written and you sort of falling behind on what you claimed you could do, then you need to be open to other people that acknowledging them by giving them a greater status on the paper. And again, papers are kind of the gold coin. They're really what helps people get advancement in our fields, promotion, jobs to begin with, and I think those need to be an honest representation of both the intellectual uh, load as well as the actual workload that was made. Plagiarism is interesting. Self-plagiarism we may not think about, but there's four types here that um, are are often discussed of self-plagiarism. So if you take a piece of your paper that's been published and just recycle the text and stick it in the next paper and go on and on and on, what could be wrong with that? Is there any? Just let you tell me, or type in the box, or if you can think of what's wrong with taking, let's say you have a methods section and you just, you do it the same way each time. So you just cut out of this paper and you stick it in your new paper, the methods, because it's the same thing. What's wrong with that? Hey, waiting for Clay to come up with an answer. Not in the spirit of contributing the body knowledge. Yeah, but there's something you may not be aware of, and that is copyright. So when you've published a paper, um, that paper now, the intellectual property, the copyright now belongs to the journal that you just sign your article over to. So you, in essence, don't own that article anymore, that those words and that paper anymore. It now is the property of the Electrochemical Society or something like that. So the proper thing to do is let's say you're writing a paper, Ryan, and you published a paper in 2010, and you go, we followed the methods of Lopez et al. 2010 with the following modifications. Okay, so someone wants to know what the method was. They can go back and look at Lopez 2010 and see that that's what you followed with these following changes. It's pretty simple. And so the whole text recycling, another thing of self-plagiarism is referred to as salami science, where you just uh, let's say you're sequencing some gene of a fly or something, and you've gotten 10 sequences out, well, you publish that. And then you get another 10 sequences and you publish that. Well, what really makes sense from a scientific point of view is that you publish the whole gene sequence. You don't just publish little fragments or just a protein or something like that. And so if you just are trying to get publications out, and that's referred to as salami science, because it's like, chopping, do this right way on the screen, chopping a larger piece of work into pieces and trying to get it published. Um, okay, so let's go take a poll. How do you decide who is first author on a paper?
You can check multiple answers this time if you
Ah,
want.
and A is your PI always is. I'm surprised nobody checked that one, because in some places that's true. B is best to talk about it and decide early on before the paper is really written. Oh, gee, how do you guess that? C, I write all of Bill O'Reilly's books. I don't really. But if you look in the front of those books, those kinds of books that end up on Walmart and Smith's right by the checkout thing, go look at the acknowledgments, and there's usually like 8 or 10 people's names listed. Oh, come on, who did that? Who wrote O'Reilly's books? Those are the people that wrote the books, frankly, not Bill O'Reilly or a number of other people I won't name. Um, some do alphabetical, right? That's D. And then E, in nano, we don't publish. Oh, I get it. Yeah, that was clever. All right. So yeah, right. It's absolutely right to um, talk about early on before the paper is really written. Okay. So when you submit a paper, think about. I'm just reading some of the other comments there, Mario and Clay. Um, you submit a paper, and here's the process. Okay, you've had a brilliant idea. You get together with some colleagues. You get the paper. You write it. You beautiful manuscript. You submit it to the journal. Your manuscript then goes to the journal editor, and the editor looks at it, reads through it, says, well, this needs to go out for review. It looks good to me. I'm going to send it to um, Clay over here at Texas Tech, and I'm going to send it to, oh, Nayland is really, really good in this field. I think I'll send it over there to in Oklahoma State, and have Nayland take a shot at it. So Nayland and, oh, who did I say before? Clay. Okay. So one is a real expert in the area. The other is more of a general expert in science or nanotechnology. So you look at the paper, you read it, you like it a lot. Maybe there's no changes, and Clay says that there's no changes. Um, but Nayland finds some real problems with the methods and suggests that a couple more experiments be run, but it's acceptable. So both the reviews will go back to the editor. Uh, the reviewers did know who the author was, but the author and authors don't know who the reviewers are. The reviewers are anonymous. The editor compiles the comments, sends a letter to the author, and says, great paper. We had 2 reviews. One was, not a whole lot of work to be done, but the other one wants you to do a few more experiments. Go ahead and do those things, and then submit it back to me, and we'll see how you did. I mean, that's not an atypical. That's a pretty normal way that peer review works. Um, Very few papers get accepted on the first pass. A lot of papers get rejected on the first pass. Some journals have rejection rates, it's 70 and 80%. Uh, um, so feel free and get used to the idea that your paper may not get accepted at the first shot. Take the reviewer comments seriously and address them quickly and get it back to the editor. The sooner you get it back to the editor with your corrections or your modifications. The editor may or may not send them back out to those same reviewers. They may or may not send them out to other reviewers, or they may just look at it themselves and accept the paper as is. And then then you can wait another 8 months until the paper is actually published. So it is a process, and it can take up to a year. In some journals, I'm not sure about Electrochemical Society or Electrochem, but Nature is 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks turnaround, very quick. But uh, in that case, they're usually pretty cutting edge, pretty succinct, pretty straight to the point sorts of papers, and they get out in Nature and Science, for that matter, fairly quickly. Other journals, again, may take a year. Most of them now are running 5, 6, 8 months, something like that. And then there's other methods of publishing that is fairly new. Is publishing electronically on sort of a blog, a refereed blog, which then papers get corrected and get modified frequently, but in real time, pretty much. So, uh, so that's the general review process. Now, there's a bunch of things to look for that an editor wants: unbiased professional reviews. They want you to assess the originality. They want you to keep it confidential about what this paper is about. They don't want you blabbing to everybody uh, about the paper and its contents. They want constructive, honest assessments, and they want the reviews back within a couple of weeks. I have one here on the floor that I need to get done in the next couple of days. I've only had it a couple of days, but I like to get them back within a week. So that's what the editor would like. But things like bias, conflicts of interest, or you don't have the expertise to do the review, or other sorts of biases that happen in the peer review process. And that's what a lot of editors and authors, for that matter, are looking out for. So if you do find yourself or someone you think is reviewing your paper that has a conflict of interest, they can recuse or excuse themselves. Again, if you need to maintain confidentiality, be objective and fair, um, and there are problems with this blind review. In other words, the author is known, but the reviewers are anonymous. There's another way that's being more and more promoted, and that is to have anonymous reviewers, but also an anonymous author. And that seems to work pretty well at addressing biases. Then there's a third way where everybody knows everybody. So, and that happens from time to time. You know the author, and you reveal yourself through the editor to the author, like, hey, Jane, they sent me your paper to review, and you can ask me any questions you want. Now, of course, if Jane's in your department, or you somehow, was your former student or something like that, that may be a conflict that needs to be um, determined on how that's resolved. And probably it's best to recuse yourself if you have that kind of a conflict. Okay, I think we have a poll question, right? Before we jump into case studies. Okay, the question is simply, what do you think is the best way to do a peer review? And maybe those of you that have published could actually speak to this from experience. Still got a couple more people out there. 7, 8. Nobody likes C, where the scientist doesn't know what she's talking about. Ugh. Okay, we can go ahead and close that poll. It looks like most people thought either where both the author and the reviewer is not known, so um, anonymous, or where both the author and the reviewer and the editor are all known. All right, so Only one person thought, well, the author is known, but the reviewer is not known. Okay, it's funny that you mentioned that because that's the most common way. Is A? Ha, I clicked that. Okay. Oh, I'm supposed to do that. Okay, so that's the most common way is A, and it is trending towards B. Sounds like some sort of logic question. Um, Ryan did write that some publications allow you to pick your reviewers, and that's absolutely right. You not just not well, actually, let me qualify that. Not pick your reviewers. You can do is you can submit a list of suggested reviewers, people that you think would be good reviewers of your paper, as well as submitting a list of people that would not be good reviewers. So some journals really encourage this. So you know so and so at Utah State is really would be a really good reviewer. They'd know a lot about what you're doing, and they would be very objective in your mind because. But you think that so and so at the University of Washington would be a poor choice because you had a big heated argument at some meeting last year, and you don't want to deal with that person whatsoever. Um, so Ryan writes, which could be ethical or unethical. I suppose the review system, I think, is pretty much founded and maintained based on people being honest. So I guess there could be problems with that right off, huh? But it it seems to work fairly well, except in a number of instances. And let's launch into one of those instances now. If you want to bring up, um, let's bring up the Leonard case. So Dr. John Leonard, um, I'll get to Ryan's, he's typing, I'll get to it here in a sec. Dr. John Leonard, one of very few molecular biologists in a particular field, receives a paper to review about a protein called survivin, which he and a graduate student in his lab are researching. The article was submitted by Dr. Mark Morris to Protein Interactions, a medium lousy impact journal, and the editor asked Dr. Leonard and two other experts in the field to review the paper. The article suggests a new interaction between survivin and the protein GFX and provides evidence for the fact that both proteins are necessary for the full survival promoting function of survivin in a cell. The results suggest that high intracellular concentrations of survivin is at least detrimental, if not fatal. Leonard, in a quick review, finds that the paper is fraught with problems, poor controls, inconsistent data and figures, alternative explanations which are not considered, and claims which are overstated. He gives the paper to his graduate student, Melissa Zane, who gives it a detailed critique and recommends significant revisions. Ms. Zane has never reviewed an article before, and Dr. Leonard thinks that doing so would be a good educational experience for her. Parenthetically, Zane notes that the finding about too much survivin being toxic to cells, a problem she's been working with the protein, and discusses it with Leonard. Both agree that they should lower the dosage of survivin in her experiments. At the lower concentration of survivin, the cells actually survive, and they live longer than they die. Leonard submits Zane's and his own comments about the research to the editor, suggesting that the paper be accepted only after a few more experiments are performed to validate some of the conclusions. One of the other reviewers has comments to Leonard's, and the editor asks Morris, the author, to make revisions before he will accept the paper. Says over the next weeks, though, Dr. Leonard ponders the interaction between GFX and survivin, which was discussed in the reviewed manuscript. Although GFX was not a part of the studies that Leonard and Zane were doing, Leonard suggests to Zane that she add a compound to the cell culture system, which would stimulate the cell to produce its own GFX. Uh, the the enhancement method works, the cells live, and Zane and Leonard draft a paper based on their new results, which includes controls. Science, a prestigious journal, similar to Nature, accepts the paper. Several months later, the lousy journal Protein Interactions publishes a revised paper. Actually, I don't know. It's probably a great journal. I don't know if it really is a journal or not. From the laboratory, Dr. Morris. After Dr. Morris sees the article in Science, he suspects that Leonard, who was an anonymous peer reviewer on the Morris paper, might have taken some of the ideas for the Science article from his paper under review. Morris knows that Leonard hadn't been working on GFX because it was hard to purify, and deduces that he used information from the unpublished manuscript to stimulate GFX activity. Dun dun dun. Importantly, this is a case that you can find on a couple other websites, but it was produced by Brian Schrag, who is for the APE, the Association for Practical and Professional Ethics, a while back, so more than 10 years ago. So what do you think? Let's go. Let's jump to the slides, please, Felipe. Um, so what do you think? Here's 6 questions, and we'll go through the answers. We don't have a poll for this necessarily, but we do have the answers and the questions. So there's 6 questions. What types of conflicts of interest might arise? Is it ever appropriate for a peer reviewer to give a paper to a graduate student? Is it appropriate for a peer reviewer to use ideas from an article under review to stop unfruitful research in the lab? Is it ever appropriate for a reviewer to use the ideas from a paper under review to achieve a different result from that used in the paper under review? How should the reviewer proceed? That's an interesting part. Number 5 is, what are some of the challenges in the current peer review process? And then last, what recourse is there for Morris if he thinks that his ideas were plagiarized? So let's go to the first one. First question, what sort of conflicts of interest might arise? Well, as I outlined a little bit earlier, it says the reviewer may benefit or not suffer financially from findings in the paper or grant application. These are conflicts of interest. May be too close to the author, may not like the author, may disagree with the methods, may be in very clear and direct competition with the author, may have religious or philosophical views that are in conflict with the research of the author. So those are all examples of conflict of interest, and one stands out, of course, and that is clear and direct competition with the author. The second question was, is it ever appropriate for a peer reviewer to give a paper to a graduate student? What do you think? You want to maybe type a response to that? What do you think about, I'll wait for somebody to start typing, about giving a paper to a graduate student who has never ever looked at a paper before? Mario says, not ethical. Clay 2, we have 2 Clays. That's probably okay if they remain under supervision. And Ryan says, okay for a graduate student to attempt to review, but the PI has ultimate review duties. All 3 of those are great answers. All 4 of those, sorry. I would add, oh, Zach, without experience, how can she make the proper corrections? Right. I would add first that they contact the editor and say, hey, I want to show my student how to be a reviewer. I'm going to give her the paper. I'll guide her. Give her some ideas on how to review a paper, and then we'll submit the review comments together. Or separately, you can put her down as a separate reviewer just to have it documented. So I think that probably is appropriate, so that it's clear. Let's see what this says here. Whoa, lost something here. Uh-oh. Middle answer didn't pop down here. There it is. There's a problem with converting between these different PowerPoints. Well, answer 3, if it were to show up, would say, yes, it's okay if you get approval from the journal editor. It is a point that how do people get experience the first time in reviewing papers and being a successful reviewer? So if the, the the PI, if Leonard was to oversee Zane in a sufficient way to help her learn how to be a reviewer, and those comments um, would be useful. Okay, so answer number three is, I won't go back to the original question, but the answer is, according to the guidelines of the Society of Neuroscience and other organizations, it is appropriate to stop unsuccessful research. So if you're reading a paper and not you're not successful in trying to get through something, but you read a paper or a grant as a reviewer and you go, oh, that's how they did it. You might think, well, that's not right. But what the guidelines state is that if information obtained during the review of a manuscript indicates that some of the reviewer's own research is unlikely to be successful, it would be ethical for the reviewer to discontinue the research. It's recommended that the reviewer tell the author about his activities. So, and you think about this. Well, okay, these are federal funds or taxpayer dollars that are supporting this research. I shouldn't be wasting the money if it doesn't work. But wait, I found out a way for it to work. So, okay, let me stop doing what I'm doing because I'm banging my head against the wall, and talk to this other author. Maybe you would like to collaborate. You can do that uh, through the editor. Number four, if a peer reviewer feels that he or she must use information contained in an article or grant application, the reviewer may be able to contact the author or applicant and try to establish a collaboration. Otherwise, it is misconduct to plagiarize the ideas described in a paper or a grant under review. Anybody know what that thing is there in that picture? I know it's nano something. It looks like something from Shark Girl and Lava Boy. But anyway, um, so uh, it is plagiarism unless you contact the author. So number five is, and we already discussed this a little bit. Oh, I haven't a clue. Thank you, Clay. Um, that anonymous peer reviewers can abuse their position by holding up the review process. So they are talking about here is one new approach to peer review makes the author anonymous to the reviewer, and another approach has both the author and reviewer aware of each other's identity. So there are a couple of ways there that we already talked about. And then lastly, if someone feels that work has been appropriated, there may be a way for the author to go to the uh, journal editor, and um, you can get legal representation. You can try and contact the university or institution where the author or where the reviewer is housed and initiate a misconduct uh, case. Remember, though, that like we talked about with whistleblowers, etc., is that you must have documentation. This is pretty clear. You would have documentation. You got the science article. You could probably get a copy of the review comments from the journal editor, uh, and all that, and it would be a pretty clear cut case. Okay, so that's peer review authorship. As you've probably seen this, looks like Gam Wilson. I don't think it is. It's who that is. Most scientists regarded the new streamlined peer review process to be quite an improvement. And there you go. And this sort of sums it up for your field, really. This is out of Nature Nanotechnology. Uh, the pretty much what I already described is the author is notified by email whether the editor decides to send a paper for review. Authors may suggest referees, um, although not always followed. By policy, referees are not identified the authors except at the request of the referee. Conceptually similar manuscripts are held to the same editorial standards. Co-submitted manuscripts must meet criteria for publication without reference to the other paper. So if you're submitting two related papers, so anyway, if you do submit to Nature Nanotechnology, there's some good advice for authors. Data acquisition, this slide and the next, we're going to talk about another case study. But this is talking about data, being the foundation of science. Integrity is important. You want to design experiments that are meaningful and aren't biased. Um, Data must be recorded in a fashion that allows others to validate findings. And this kind of goes back to some comments that I think Clay made. Let's see, what was it that you said? Oh, Zach was talking about how much preparation your mentor took in data collection and data books. But this is exactly hits the heart of this, is that um, data needs to be very uh, well documented and maintained and safeguarded and available for the most part. And the bottom line here too is who actually owns data collected in an academic environment is a research project funded by the federal government is another issue often subject to misunderstanding. So that's what we're going to talk about here in this next case. Um, in a sec, we'll pull up the Jessica Banks case and ask these questions. Who owns data? How could the problem that we're going to talk about be resolved or avoided? And under what conditions can you copy data? So let's go ahead and jump into the Jessica Banks. Cool. Felipe, when you get a chance. There we go. Okay. Jessica Banks, a PhD student working with Hayward, a sociologist studying urban sprawl, has recently defended her dissertation, is now ready to file it and leave for her new job. During her second year, when starting research with Hayward, Banks divided her time among 3 projects. Then, in her third year, after consulting with Hayward, she decided to continue and expand upon one of the 3 lines of investigation for her dissertation. This was also a project most closely related to Hayward's grant at the time. Later, Banks' experimental plan and early results were included in Hayward's grant renewal. The other 2 promising lines of research were left incomplete. Banks' new job is a tenure position in a mid-sized Western liberal arts college. Shortly before leaving for a job, though, Banks comes to Hayward's office to make copies of research data stored only on Hayward's computer using special software, which she also plans to copy. Although her new faculty position will be mostly teaching, she's looking forward to continuing some research as well. In particular, she's eager to pick up where she left off with the 2 incomplete projects she worked on earlier. Hayward comes in as Banks is downloading material and asks, "What the heck are you doing?" She tells him, and he then says to her that she cannot take data. "They belong to me," he says. Banks is confused. "But I did the work, and I wanted to follow up on it. I can't do that without data." Hayward's adamant. "I'm sorry, but you should understand. Our research project was a joint enterprise, and all the work you did was funded by money I brought in by grants. The data don't belong to you or to me. They actually belong to the university, and the work will be continued with other students. I've already talked to one of my new students about working on this project in the fall." Banks, seeing her plans fall apart around her, protests, but Hayward is implacable. After a few minutes, she stalks away, but later that afternoon, she gets together with her classmate Paul and tells him about her run-in with Hayward. "Look," says Paul, "Hayward has no right to deny you access to data. You did the work that generated all those data." "I know, right?" she says. But Hayward wouldn't listen to the argument when I made it. "Well, here's my suggestion," Paul says after some reflection. "Just stop by his office and copy it sometime this week, and I happen to know he'll be out of town, so he'll never know." "That's the fair thing to do." Well, Banks seems uncertain, but she says she'll think about it, Paul's suggestion, and decide before the weekend. All right. Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't scroll that down. I had a cheat sheet. This also was adapted from a cases of teaching and assessment, University of Minnesota, that you can find up at this columbia.edu website if you like. All right, so on to the questions. Felipe, we'll go on to, there we go. I'm so glad I don't have to figure out this. Felipe is a master. Okay, so the first question, who owns research data? And this is always a surprise. Well, not always. Sometimes it's not a surprise. But in federally sponsored research, the university owns data but allows the PI on the grant to be the steward. So the PI takes responsibility for the collection, recording, storage, and retention and disposal of data, and the people in the lab or on the project are essentially working for the university, which assigns the rights to the data to the PI. When data are published, the copyright is retained by the PI, who then assigns it to the journal. So this goes back to um, text recycling and self-plagiarism. So, you publish your paper, you have the copyright on these data, but when you publish it, it now goes to the journal. Had the faculty member undertaken a research project on behalf of the university would have the copyright to the data, but since faculty members generally perform research on their own, copyright belongs to them. Data and data books. This is an issue that's popped up a number of times around a number of institutions. Data and data books collected by undergrads, graduate students, and postdocs belong to the grantee institution, and students should not take those data, although retaining copies of data is allowed with permission. Now, this is important for maybe a lot of you folks, is with industry-funded research, data can belong to the sponsor. So if you work for the labs or you work some places, there may be, and you should find out, uh, limitations on what you have access to and what you can do with data that you yourself have generated. So that's really important to find that out now, because I know of at least a couple instances where grad students could not use those data for their dissertation and could not graduate. So that's interesting, I think. And then here's the last two is, how could this problem be avoided? Well, duh, have a discussion with your mentor, with your advisor. So it says here clearly, Jessica, or I should say early on, not like as you're heading out the door. Hey, by the way, I'm going to take all these things. That doesn't work. But it's also the PI's problem or the faculty member's problem. That's bad mentoring to have not made that clear early on. So Jessica and her fellow student were unaware of the nature and ownership of data in the lab. Hayward and other faculty members in the department should have made that clear to her and all other students who owns data. This is one of those areas of research, where, as with authorship, if you talk about it early on, you can usually have a pretty good relationship about that. And then under what conditions can copying of data be done? So had Banks known, she could have asked Hayward early on permission to copy data and software and discuss the possibilities of what? Oh yeah, collaborating when she gets to her new position. Um, she would no doubt like to continue the work that she had started and maintain good relations with her former mentor. Why? And this is something to always remember about your mentor, your PI, your faculty member, your advisor, is that you're going to want to get letters of recommendation down the road for grants or for other uses, jobs. Stealing data is not the best way to get those a good letter anyway. You might get a bad letter, but it's not the best way to get a good letter and to start a professional relationship. So usually, if you have that discussion early on, so when she had 3 projects going and she decided to choose one, it might have been a good point at that time to say, I really like these other 2 projects. If there's any way I can continue to work on them when I'm done with my disc, I'd like to do that. Or would you let me know if if you decide to find other people to take on these projects? I'd like a shot at it, that kind of thing. A reasonable professor would come up with that. Okay, well, let's hit the final corner of the track here. We'll talk about some data storage and retention. Uh-oh, we have a question. Let's see if you can come up with the right answer. Who owns your data? Okay, so it looks like most of you acknowledge that UNM owns your data. And I guess it's kind of a quick question, a trick question, because I mean, really, your PI is the one that is the um, holds control over those data. The the institution UNM is more or less entrusted the PI to manage those data, even though they're federal funds and they're um, maintained by the institution. It's usually up to the PI. So I mean, either A or B, neither one of those is wrong. And then the company you work for, I'm glad you realize that. Just make sure you understand, those two of you, that what the restrictions are, and that you'll have access to those data for your purposes, i.e., finishing your degree uh, by the time you get done, by the time you're ready to get done. Okay, great. I'm glad you went through that. Next slide, Mr. Amaral. Okay, data storage and retention. NIH requires grant recipients to keep data 3 years. NSF has something similar. APA looks at 5 years of data retention. Rule of thumb is that you should hold on to your data, or your PI should hold on to the data, or have it in a file, a Lobo vault, in some sort of format that can be pulled up for 5 years after the grant has expired, or it's all, the work's been done. It says legally data retained for patent protection and in case there are any misconduct allegations based on those data is important. Um, but what really happens is, it says your researchers in practice will store data as long as they feel necessary. I got to tell you, I still have uh, data from uh, chipmunk behavioral tests from 1986. So, you know, right. Some people just keep things forever. Confidential data. I know places like CASA, the Center for Alcohol and Substance Abuse and Addictions, will have a way to um, warehouse data and de-identify data that then can be used for a sort of data mining of unidentifiable data for sort of meta analyses and such. So there are ways to store confidential data, either by stripping their identifiers, or uh, keeping them under lock and key somewhere. And then storing electronic data with archival resources. Again, UNM's got LoboVault. There are other ways to go ahead and store data. Some of the principles of warehousing. This uh, slide and the next one are from Kevin Comerford, who's at our UNM University Library. He's an expert in that. He's worked for Microsoft for many years and knows a lot about security and storage and that kind of stuff. And really these two slides are summed up by these 5 principles. Strategy, have one. Centralize your data where your data are stored, organize in a standard fashion, maintain copies, and security, keep account and password secure. One rule of thumb on organization is that you keep your personal data, library data, and project data away from each other. Keep them in separate files. Storage, laptop, portable hard drives, mainframes, those are all different kinds of storage, which you need to maintain version control. So that, create a system where you know when you've updated a file to something else, that you're not, maintaining old files or using older files. Security, be aware that low security are things like the satellite, Starbucks. Higher security, UNM, probably your house, your home is probably a higher security. Of course, for those working in the labs, you probably have even higher security, of course. Um, Data loss and management, it's irresponsible to lose data on a project. Others depend on those data. Um, be aware of data rights that you're using, and so this goes back to, who's funding you, and if there's some limitations on those data. And generally the rule of thumb here is keep the wrong people away, but the right people should have access. And this is where the hit by a bus argument is important. For if you should leave the lab or somehow for some reason not show up tomorrow, other people depend on you, or depend on data that you're generating. How can they get access to that? Those sorts of passwords and locational information should be available to those that need it. So you want to document how and where your data are stored. Um, High security data, like human subjects data, in particular, think about that a lot. Never store private or human research data on public online services. In other words, don't use Google Docs or Dropbox or other systems for that. I know Dropbox has completely lost their security level or their password ability for about a 12-hour period. This is a couple years ago. So you could go in, if you knew that, you could go in and look at anybody's file anywhere. So you don't want something that's sensitive, subject to that possibility. And then this is nearing the end, is the National Science Foundation does have a data sharing policy. And what I like about this is it really sums up a lot what we've talked about in this hour or so, is that NSF expects significant findings from research and activities it supports to be promptly submitted for publication. So we talked about publication and authorship. With authorship that reflects the contributions of those involved, it expects investigators to share with others at no more than incremental cost and within a reasonable time data, samples, physical collections, and other supporting materials created or gathered in the course of the work. It also encourages awardees to share software and inventions to make them useful and usable. Exceptions may be allowed to safeguard the rights of individuals and subjects and the validity of results from the integrity of collections. So NSF, if you're being funded by NSF, which a lot of us are, um, uh, they really support sharing of information and data and results of projects that they've supported. Of course, there are limitations to some of this. I think this may be the last slide, but what's kind of brings home again is that this from December, so almost 2 years ago, from Science, that here's a dispute over lab notebooks lands researcher in jail. Judy, a biochemist who became world famous for her studies in chronic fatigue syndrome. Sorry, I'm not up on that literature. Was arrested and jailed in November in Ventura, California, on felony charge of possessing stolen property from a research institute that fired her in September. The property at issue consisted of her lab notebooks and related data. So there's a real life instance of a person that thought those data were hers. Okay, I think that may be the last slide. Yeah. Felipe, would you bring up that download list again? When you get a chance. Anybody have any questions? Oh yeah, here's the. Wanted to. Is that it? Yeah, that one maybe. Can that one pop up? Is that downloadable only? Can you bring that
I'm
article
sorry,
up?
what do
Oh,
you
you probably
want?
can't see what I'm pointing at. The nanoparticle enables cheap and easy tests for blood clots. Can you bring that on the screen?
Sure. I don't think I have that one up though. I have to.
This just came out today, and I thought it was an interesting application. Um, if if you could write, oh, the download path for Albuquerque is not valid. Oh dear, sorry, Clay. Um, it might be useful for the 10 of you just to type one word or two words about kind of what area of nano you're in. And so are you in biomedical, or are you in military application? I don't want to know anything. I don't want to know anything that you'd have to kill me for. Um, but that might be somewhat helpful. So Mario is biomedical. Aaron is semiconductors. Oh, cool. Um, well, Clay, you just haven't made up your mind now, have you? I think you're still bringing that up, or am I supposed to do that? Oh, okay, good.
I'm still trying to bring it up.
Nailing catalysts for energy. Oh, cool. Ryan, electrochemistry. Clay. Oh, okay. Thanks, Clay. And Brittany, semiconductors. Okay, there we go. So again, this just came out today, November 6th. Um, nanoparticle enables cheap and easy test for blood clots. And it's talking again about semiconductors, which I guess that's relevant to both Aaron and Brittany, being used as drug delivery for drug delivery. And that's kind of cool. I mean, uh, it really is quite a diverse area of study, and it seems to me lends itself to I mean, a whole bunch of emergent, not just emerging technologies, but also emerging ethical issues that I'll be really interested to see what you guys come up with in a couple of weeks, um, about things that could be used or misused. For instance, I just read in New Scientist about a nano microphone, and it's not based on any kind of microphone, that it's based on molecules that are warmer or cooler, and it will direct a camera towards a source of someone speaking. So it's a little spy deal, but has these little tiny micro, or not micro, nano microphones. I guess that'd be nanophones that help operate cameras, very small cameras. And then the cameras, if you have two of these nano microphones going on the either side of the camera, it can, like our ears, can determine direction, and will turn the camera towards whoever's speaking. Pretty cool, pretty cool. Now, what could possibly go wrong with that? Think NSA. All right, I think that's it for this evening. Does anybody have any questions? Next week, we'll be doing um, a little bit on Frankenstein, and then a little bit about scientists and any kind of responsibilities that you may think we have to society. No more questions? No more chats? Clay is typing. I'll wait for Clay, and then we'll or anybody else. Or the mentoring question. Oh yeah. The list of mentoring questions should be on the second session. If not, I can add them again to today's folder when I upload folder for session 4. Make myself a note. I think it's in there a couple places. All right, sounds good. All right, ladies and gents, thanks very much. See you next week. Have a nice one. Stay warm.
Bye, guys. I'm closing the meeting room now.